Disclaimer: this story is based on real events, told with respect for everyone involved. It's meant to share an experience and emotions, not to hurt or judge anyone. Viewer discretion is advised. Everyone ignored the signs, but I knew my father was hiding something. It wasn't just a feeling, it was like a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface, something nobody else wanted to see or believe. At first, it started with small things. Little changes that most people would have brushed off as normal or just stress from daily life. But deep inside, I felt there was more to it. I could see it in the way he acted when he thought no one was looking, in the sudden phone calls he would take behind closed doors, and the strange late nights when he'd say he was just working. My father was always the man we looked up to, the strong, dependable figure who seemed to have everything under control. To the outside world, he was perfect. But home was a different story. Something didn't feel right. And when you live with someone, you begin to notice the little cracks in their mask. Everyone else chose to ignore those cracks. Maybe it was denial or just not wanting to believe the truth. But I couldn't look away. I had to know what was really going on. Our family was close, or at least that's what we told ourselves. We shared meals, laughed at silly jokes, and made plans like any other family. But behind the smiles and routine, the air was heavy with secrets. The silence between us grew louder, filled with unspoken questions and invisible walls. I tried to talk to my mother about it once, but she just shook her head and said I was imagining things. That only made me more determined to find answers on my own. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself scrolling through my father's phone when he left it unlocked. I know it's not something I should have done, but the need to understand what was happening was stronger than the fear of crossing a line. And there it was, the messages, the calls, the hidden conversations that didn't belong to him or any friend I knew. I felt a mix of shock and sadness washing over me, like the world I thought I lived in was suddenly breaking apart. What hurt the most wasn't just the discovery itself but the way I realized my father had been living a double life, right under our noses. The signs were there all along, late nights, secretive phone calls, distant looks, but no one wanted to see them for what they were. I kept asking myself, why did he do this? Was it something missing from his life? Did he regret what he was doing? The questions piled up, but there were no easy answers. As the days went by, I watched my father more closely, hoping to catch a glimpse of the truth in his eyes. But he became colder, more guarded. The man who once shared stories and laughter with me now barely spoke more than a few words a day. The distance wasn't just physical, it was like he was a stranger living under the same roof. I felt trapped between loyalty to my family and the need to protect myself from the pain I was slowly uncovering. And then, one day, everything changed. There was a phone call that left my mother in tears, and my father rushed out of the house without saying a word. The house felt emptier than ever, filled with silence that screamed louder than words. I realized this was just the beginning, that the truth I had uncovered was bigger and more complicated than I ever imagined. I want to take you on this journey with me, sharing every moment of doubt, fear, and heartbreak. Because sometimes, the people closest to us hide secrets that shake the very foundation of what we believe. Everyone ignored the signs, but I couldn't. And what I discovered after that night changed everything about how I saw my father, my family, and myself. Stay with me, because the story is far from over. The next part will reveal what happened when I confronted him, the consequences that followed, and how a family struggles to hold itself together when trust is broken. But for now, all you need to know is this: sometimes, the hardest truth is the one that's right in front of us, waiting to be faced. And when you face it, nothing is ever the same again. After that night, everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I kept replaying every small moment, trying to piece together how long this had been going on. It wasn't just a one-time thing, it felt like a secret world my father had built behind closed doors, away from the family we all thought was so close. But why? What was he hiding? And how deep did this go? To understand what was happening, I had to go back to how things used to be. My father wasn't always like this. When I was younger, he was the kind of dad who took me to the park, who cheered the loudest at my school events, who told stories that made me laugh until I cried. He had dreams, hopes, and a way of making everything feel safe. But somewhere along the way, something changed. The man I knew started to disappear, replaced by someone quieter, distant, almost like a stranger. My parents' marriage had its ups and downs, like any other, but the cracks started showing more clearly after my mother had her health issues a few years ago. The stress seemed to weigh heavily on my father, and I noticed the way he started working longer hours, coming home later, and shutting himself off when he got in. He stopped sharing those little moments we once had, and the house felt colder. I wondered if that was when the distance grew, not just between them but with all of us. I tried talking to my older sister about it. She seemed just as confused and hurt, but she also told me to be careful with what I was thinking. Dad's not perfect, but maybe there's more to the story, she said quietly. That made me realize no one really wanted to face the truth, maybe because it was too painful or because they feared what it might mean for the family. But the more I stayed silent, the heavier the weight on my chest grew. One afternoon, while my father was at work, I found myself going through old family photos. It felt strange, like looking into a different life. There were pictures of happier times, of birthdays and holidays where smiles were genuine and the future seemed bright. I held a photo of my parents laughing together, something I hadn't seen in years. It made me wonder, when did it all start to fall apart? Was it something I missed, or something no one wanted to admit? The mystery only deepened when I overheard a conversation between my mother and one of her close friends. They talked in whispers, careful to keep their voices low, but I caught enough to know they were worried about my father. The words trust, secrets, and betrayal floated through the air like shadows. My heart pounded, but I couldn't step in. It was like a puzzle missing a few pieces, and I was desperate to find them. At school, I struggled to focus. My mind was full of questions I didn't have answers for, and it was hard to pretend everything was normal. I started writing in a journal, trying to make sense of the chaos inside me. Sometimes, the pain felt unbearable, but putting it into words helped. I wanted to understand why someone I loved so much could hurt us like this, or maybe the real hurt was from the secrets we all kept, pretending nothing was wrong. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to check the phone again. This time, I found something that shook me even more. A set of messages that didn't just hint at secrets but spoke about meetings and plans that made no sense. There were names I didn't recognize and places I had never heard him mention. My hands trembled as I read, but I knew I couldn't stop. The more I uncovered, the more I felt like I was walking deeper into a forest with no clear path out. I wondered if my father even knew how much this was hurting me. Did he realize the damage his choices were causing? Or was he lost too, trapped in a world where the truth was too hard to face? Sometimes, I caught him staring off into space, like he was trying to escape something that followed him no matter where he went. The father I remembered, the man who was my hero, seemed buried beneath layers of lies and silence. The house had become a place of tension, where every glance held a question, and every silence screamed louder than words. My mother withdrew into herself, avoiding eye contact and retreating behind closed doors. My sister stayed quiet, watching everything unfold with a mix of fear and confusion. And me, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I wasn't ready for but couldn't turn away from. Then, one evening, my father came home later than usual. He looked exhausted, but there was something else in his eyes, something urgent, maybe even desperate. I wanted to ask him what was going on, to demand answers, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I watched as he went straight to his room, shutting the door softly behind him, leaving the house even quieter than before. I realized that this story wasn't just about secrets or betrayals. It was about a family struggling to hold itself together when everything felt like it was falling apart. It was about the truth hiding behind smiles and the courage it takes to face what's been buried for so long. And as I stood there, waiting for what would come next, I knew one thing for sure: nothing was going to be the same again. The next chapter of this story is coming soon. You'll hear more about the conversations I had, the confrontations that followed, and how each step revealed more than I ever expected. But for now, the silence remains, and with it, the weight of everything left unsaid. Days passed, but the weight in the house only grew heavier. My father's silence was like a wall between us, thicker with every passing hour. I wanted to understand what was going on, but every attempt to get close was met with coldness or a look that told me to stop digging. It felt like I was trapped in a storm I couldn't escape from, caught between the pieces of a family falling apart and the need to protect what was left. My mother, once so lively and full of warmth, had become almost invisible. She moved around the house like a shadow, avoiding questions and never looking me in the eye. I saw her crying late at night, muffling her sobs with her hands. I wanted to comfort her but didn't know how. It was like she was holding a secret too painful to share. Sometimes, I wondered if she knew more than she let on, if she had been hiding her own truths for years, trying to keep the family together no matter what. My sister was the hardest to read. She stayed quiet, but her eyes told stories I wasn't ready to hear. Once, I caught her staring at our father from across the room, like she was waiting for him to break, to say something that would explain it all. But he never did. Instead, he kept disappearing into himself, retreating further away from us and the life we shared. The tension wasn't just in the silence, it was in the small things, the way my father's phone buzzed at odd hours, how he avoided family dinners, how the house felt like a battlefield without any clear fights. I started noticing things others didn't, the way he glanced nervously when the phone rang, the quick messages he deleted, the hidden drawer in his desk where he kept papers I wasn't supposed to see. One afternoon, I found myself in the living room alone when the doorbell rang. It was a woman I'd never seen before, someone who didn't belong to our usual circle of family or friends. She looked at me with a mix of sadness and hesitation, like she wasn't sure if she should stay or run. I recognized the look from some of the messages I had seen on my father's phone. My heart pounded as she quietly asked if my father was home. I told her he wasn't and she left almost as quickly as she had come, leaving behind a silence louder than any words. That visit opened a new chapter of questions and fears. Who was she? What did she want from my father? And how many others were involved in this tangled web of secrets? I wanted to tell my mother or my sister, but I wasn't sure if it would make things better or worse. The house was already breaking, and I was afraid any more truth would shatter it completely. Meanwhile, at school, I found it harder to concentrate. The whispers of my friends felt distant, like I was living in a different world where no one could reach me. Sometimes, I thought about reaching out, about sharing what was happening, but I was afraid of judgment, of people not understanding the mess my family was in. It was easier to keep the pain hidden, locked away behind a smile I wore like armor. I kept searching for answers in every little detail, every moment I could steal. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't just about one mistake or one secret, it was about broken trust, about promises that were never kept, and the long shadow that infidelity can cast over a family. It wasn't just my father who was hurting, we all were. And yet, no one knew how to fix it or even where to start. The hardest part was waiting, for a conversation that never came, for a moment of honesty that felt forever out of reach. I wanted to believe there was still hope, but with every passing day, the hope felt smaller, like a flickering candle in the dark. I don't know what's going to happen next. All I know is that this story isn't over, and the choices we make now will change everything. There are secrets still hidden, conversations still waiting to be had, and a family trying to find its way through the silence. And as I stand here, watching everything unravel, I wonder if we'll ever be able to come back from this, or if some things, once broken, can never be repaired. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope, one wrong step, and everything could come crashing down. The silence in the house was suffocating, thick with things left unsaid. My father's distance grew more intense, like he was carrying a secret too heavy to share, and every glance he gave me was filled with a mix of guilt and fear. I could tell he was running out of places to hide, but no one knew how to pull him back. My mother stopped leaving her room except for meals, and even then, her eyes were hollow, as if she was trying to protect herself from a pain too deep to face. The woman who had once been the heart of our family now seemed like a stranger. I caught my sister staring out the window more than usual, lost in her own thoughts, as if she was waiting for a sign that everything might still be okay. But I wasn't sure if that sign would ever come. Every night, I found myself sitting by the doorway to my father's room, hoping for a crack in his armor, a moment of truth. But the door remained closed, the walls around him impenetrable. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence, or for the silence to break us. One evening, I noticed his phone light up with a message that made my heart skip a beat. It was from the woman who had come to our door weeks ago. I felt a surge of anger and sadness all at once. Who was she really? How much did she know? And how much was my father willing to risk, not just for himself, but for all of us? The tension in the house reached a boiling point. I knew the moment was coming when I couldn't stay silent any longer. The questions I had buried for so long were about to demand answers. But what those answers would be, whether they would heal or destroy, I still didn't know. And as I waited for the inevitable confrontation, one thing was certain: the truth was about to come out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Just when I thought I was prepared for whatever would come next, everything took a sharp, unexpected turn. One afternoon, while my father was out, I found a small envelope tucked away in the back of his drawer. It wasn't like him to keep anything hidden in such an obvious place, or maybe that was exactly the point. Inside, there was a letter addressed to my mother. I hesitated before opening it, but the weight of unanswered questions pushed me forward. The letter wasn't what I expected. It wasn't an apology or a confession. Instead, it revealed something darker and far more complicated. My father wasn't just hiding an affair, there was another secret, one that involved debts and people I didn't understand, people who seemed dangerous. The tone of the letter was desperate, begging for forgiveness but also warning of consequences if the truth came out. My heart raced as I read the words that painted a picture of a man trapped in a world I never imagined. This new discovery changed everything. The story wasn't just about infidelity anymore, it was about fear, mistakes piling on mistakes, and a family caught in the middle of something much bigger than hurt feelings or broken trust. Suddenly, the late-night phone calls, the secret meetings, the tense atmosphere in the house made sense in a terrifying new way. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into an abyss I couldn't see the bottom of. I wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but I was pulled deeper by the need to protect my family and find out the whole truth. The stakes were higher than I ever imagined, and the fragile threads holding us together were about to snap. The tension was unbearable. The next time my father came home, I knew the moment of reckoning was closer than ever. But what would happen when everything finally came to light? And would we survive the storm that was about to hit? The answers were still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. The night my father finally sat us down to talk, the air was thick with tension. His eyes were tired but steady, and for the first time in months, he didn't avoid our questions. He told us everything: the affair, the debts, the fear that had been controlling him. He admitted how wrong he had been, how the secrets had grown beyond what he could handle alone. Hearing his voice break as he apologized made the pain feel more real, but also strangely lighter, like a weight finally lifting. My mother listened quietly, her face a mix of hurt and relief. My sister and I exchanged glances, knowing this was the moment we had all been waiting for: the truth, finally laid bare. It wasn't easy, and the wounds were fresh, but the honesty opened a door we hadn't dared to knock on before. We all agreed that rebuilding trust would take time, and that nothing would be the same. But at least we were no longer prisoners of silence. Just as we thought the storm had passed, my father pulled out one last envelope. Inside was a letter from the woman who had come to our door weeks earlier. It wasn't a threat or an accusation. It was a confession. She revealed that she had been trying to protect us, warning him to come clean before things got worse. She admitted her own part in the chaos but said she wanted no more lies. That twist changed everything again. The story wasn't just about betrayal or secrets, it was about a complicated web of protection, fear, and unexpected allies. And as the night ended, I realized this family's story was far from over. But now, at least, we were ready to face whatever came next, together. In the days that followed, the house slowly began to feel like home again, even if the cracks in our family were still visible. We started talking more openly, sharing feelings that had been buried under years of silence. My father took steps to fix the damage he'd caused, not just with money or apologies, but by being present, by showing us he wanted to make things right. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of doubt, but the first steps toward healing were taken. My mother found strength in forgiveness, not because she forgot what happened, but because she chose to believe in the possibility of change. My sister and I learned that even the closest families have shadows, but what matters most is how you face them together. The woman from the letter reached out again, and though it was strange, her honesty helped close some of the open wounds. She became a part of the story, a reminder that life is rarely black and white, and sometimes, the people we least expect are the ones trying to protect us in their own way. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to ignore the signs when you don't want to see the truth. But holding on to hope, facing the pain, and choosing to communicate, that's what helped us survive. This story isn't just about infidelity or secrets, it's about the power of truth and forgiveness in a family. No matter how hard things get, the ties that bind us don't break so easily. And sometimes, the hardest stories are the ones that teach us the most. 4.